Boy, oh boy, was that an ugly one.
You are Locked On Kansas State, your daily podcast on the Kansas State Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Kansas State, your daily Kansas State Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Christian Rao, and thank you so much for making Locked On Kansas State your first listen every single day. Now part of the number one sports podcast network. Welcome back to my everydayers, and we are diving into Kansas State winning in Stillwater 14-6. It was an ugly game. There is no way to shake this, and a win's a win. You take that and you move to 500, move to 5-5. Bowl eligibility stays alive. All the positives are there. There's no doubt about that, but this is a game that just didn't feel good at all. It felt flat. It felt like this team was not there at moments. I had a hard time being entertained by it. I don't know how you felt as a fan, but overall, it was a tough one to watch. But either way, they find a way to get the first win in Stillwater since 2017, their second time since winning this millennium. The last time they won other than 2017 was 1999 in Stillwater. And maybe, just maybe, they can move away from that narrative. We're starting to get rid of some of these narratives. The fact that Texas Tech couldn't win in Manhattan, well, that was fixed 2 weeks ago. Kansas State couldn't win in Stillwater. Well, that was fixed today, even though it was a sloppy way. The offense wasn't great. The defense did what they needed to do to not let Oklahoma State get in the end zone, and that was important. Although in the first half, there was a bend, don't break mentality for sure. Overall, let's start with the defense first on this one because they deserve the most credit in this one. They left Oklahoma State to only 6 points. It was 2 field goals, both coming in the first half of the football game. They were scoreless in the second half. And it was just one of those games where it was going to get gritty, and I'm guessing that's what we're going to hear from Chris Kleiman in the presser. I don't think he's going to be very happy in the presser. I don't think he can be impressed or be satisfied with this team other than finding a way to win on the road. And that's probably the best you're going to get from him. That's just my overall guess. We'll talk about his reactions on the episode on tomorrow when we dig into his post-game presser. But, Oklahoma State, they found a way to get some offense on Kansas State's defense, although they didn't get in the end zone. They had 373 total yards compared to only 284 for Kansas State on the offensive side. As I mentioned, Kansas State's offense wasn't the best. Zane Flores had 233 yards in the air. He did throw 2 interceptions. The turnovers is what stepped up for Kansas State's defense. They had multiple turnovers in this game. They had 5 turnovers compared to only 1 for Kansas State. 5 Oklahoma State turnovers. And if you remember, Kansas State had 5 turnovers against Texas Tech in the game last week or 2 weeks ago before the open week. If Kansas State was going to limit their turnovers in that game, you might think they're still alive. And this one, if it wasn't for those Oklahoma State turnovers, Oklahoma State probably would have won this game quite handily because that was the only thing that was keeping Kansas State in this one, was that the defense finding ways to get turnovers. And it was really 4 turnovers, although there was 5. There was an interception on a Hail Mary pass at the end of the half. So, you really want to count that one? On the stat sheet, yes, but, in the eyes of, how it actually matters, no, not really. But either way, even if you want to count that one or not, it's either a +3 or +4 turnover margin in favor of Kansas State. The defense deserves that credit. The defense did a really good job at making this team make mistakes, and arguably they should have made these mistakes. Oklahoma State is the worst Power 4 school in the country right now. They're 1-9 after this loss. Their only win comes to an FCS school. They haven't had a Big 12 conference win in 2 seasons, and you could make the argument that the closest they've been to winning a Big 12 conference game in the last 2 seasons was today against Kansas State. And even though they didn't score in the second half, it was still that close. This game should have been a blowout, but the offense couldn't step up and do their job. The defense stood up, got themselves 5 turnovers, and that's ultimately what led to Kansas State winning this football game. They limited Oklahoma State to only 5 for 12 on third down conversions. Although they allowed 226 yards passing and 147 yards rushing, you could make the argument that the defense played a bend, don't break mentality. Now, they did have Way too many penalties, in my opinion, especially on the defensive side with a couple defensive holdings and things like that. Overall, Kansas State had 6 penalties for 50 yards. It felt like a lot more. It felt like those 6 penalties came at the most terrible times, most opportune times for Oklahoma State, especially towards the end of that football game where they were ultimately driving to inside close to the red zone to ultimately try and find a way to tie this football game, but it never happened. It never materialized because Kansas State's defense stepped up and did a good job. So I got to give credit for that. And this is a defense that is without Austin Romaine for the first time all season. Many injuries. Toby Asum-Sami's out. He's been out for a couple weeks now. You have other players that have to step up. Desmond Purnell steps up. He leads the team with 8 tackles again, 6 solo tackles. Desmond Purnell has turned into the defensive MVP this season. After the first couple games, and if I would have said that he's going to wind up being the defensive MVP, you might think I'm crazy because he didn't have a great start to his season, and he's turned into the most valuable piece on this defense this year, and it's a shame that he's a senior. It's a shame that we're not going to get him next year when ultimately you hope that you can get some more success, a season that you were hoping to get this year. Now you have to go ahead and bring in that new narrative called, well, there's always next year, because that's just what Kansas State is right now. 5-5, you have the opportunity to go to 7-5 if you win against the next 2 opponents. We're going to dig into what that means more towards the end of this show and what's next, but at least you have an opportunity to make a bowl game, and you have to give the credit where credit's due, and that's to the defense of Kansas State. The offense, though, on the other hand, wasn't impressive at all, and there are some glaring issues, and I think some glaring issues that are probably going to impact the rest of the season, most definitely, and then what they do in the transfer portal come January. Let's discuss that next on this instant reaction show of Kansas State taking down Oklahoma State, moving to 500 on the season, 4-3 in Big 12 play, right here on Locked On Kansas State. But first, the NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of a game or want to ride the hot hand, well, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. I mean, I don't think they have them, but you could probably find a way to, maybe pick your over-unders on how teams like the New Orleans Pelicans are going to do after they fired their coach, Willie Green, today after their slow and horrendous start. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into same-game parlays for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps the game exciting, and that's the best part when you're trying to get exciting, because hey, for this game that I talked about, this was not an exciting game. Kansas State and Oklahoma State. Maybe if you had a little bit something on FanDuel, that would have made this game a little bit more fun for you, especially when that team's making a late push. When you're talking about basketball games, football games, you name it. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets if that first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com. Sign up, play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Kansas State wins the game. I mean, let's be happy there, right? Let's be excited. Let's cheer from the rooftops, if you will. I mean, do you feel excited? Do you feel happy they won this game? I'm not one of those people that want to lose games in hopes that coaching changes or anything like that. That's just not my forte. I know that there are a certain segmented part of this fan base, some that listen to this show, I've seen it in the comments, that want this team to kind of lose out so they can make drastic changes. I'm not in there. I will always be rooting for the team. I will always want them to win football games. I think that's just a terrible way to root for sports. That's just not my sport identity, if you will. But either way, it was ugly. It was an absolute ugly win for Kansas State, and I don't think you can really disagree with that one. 14-6 final against a team that hasn't won against an FBS school all season long. Their only win comes at the beginning of the season against UT Martin. And of course, haven't had a win in the Big 12 Conference since 2023. And this is probably their closest, winning 14-6. Kansas State moves to 5-5, 4-3 in Big 12 play. And I'll be honest with you, folks. I was not excited about this offense. This offense struggled mightily, especially at the beginning of this game. I mean, if you want to just talk about drive after drive, I mean, the first quarter, with the exception of Oklahoma State's field goal, was a punt battle. Oklahoma State punts, Kansas State punts. There was an Oklahoma State field goal, Kansas State punts, Oklahoma State punts, Kansas State punts. That's your first quarter. How is that any type of way to come out of a bye week. You had an entire week, an entire 2 weeks to prep for this game, prep for the rest of the season, develop whatever players you need to kind of have this last 3-game stretch. And that's how you come out. That's how you come out firing. That was the most flat I've seen Kansas State all season long. Now, you had honestly your worst loss of the season against Texas Tech. It was a blowout 2 weeks ago. It got you out of any kind of consideration for Big 12 play, for Big 12 championship play, I should say, with your third loss of the season in conference play. But that doesn't mean you have to quit on the season. And that was the feeling that I was getting in that first quarter. Now, my feelings did change a little bit. They found a way to come back. But in that first quarter, that flatness of play, I was starting to question. I was like, man, did this team quit? Did this team actually finally quit on this coaching staff? And it got better. It didn't get much better, but it got better where that narrative kind of got out of my head. But we're talking in the first 3 drives of this football game for Kansas State, all in the first quarter, you're getting 10 plays for 9 yards. That was your first quarter. It was very struggleful. It was bad. And you didn't get your touchdown until the middle of the second quarter, where you finally had a little bit of life. And you take that. You take the life that you can. Jayce Brown had a nice slant on the play. Now, Jayce Brown got injured later in the game. Looked like he hurt maybe his hand or his wrist. We'll get more on that when we hear from Chris Kleiman. But hopefully that means he's going to be able to return for the next couple of games, because you absolutely need him. He's the only type of target, type of threat you really have left on this offensive roster. And if it wasn't for Jayce Brown in this game, I don't think you win this football game. Even with the 5 turnovers in the defense, Jayce Brown was the only thing that really gave this offense life. And I guess what I'm trying to get to is that Avery Johnson, Jayce Brown, that dynamic duo was great. It's been great all season long, but it can only take you so far. It can only take you so far in Big 12 play. It can only take you so far in winning and getting past maybe 6 wins to a bowl game. And of course, it has no way of getting you to 10-2 ceiling like we were hoping for this offseason, and maybe potentially getting to the college football playoffs. The running game has been abysmal. And you start to try and get optimistic, and you try and say, okay, well, there's been some life. There's been some sparks over the last couple of weeks when you finally make the decision that Joe Jackson's the guy moving forward. He gets his first career 100-yard game a few weeks ago. There was just no push from the offensive line. There was no help on the running game either. I mean, you couldn't break much tackles. You only got 107 yards from the entire Kansas State offense on the rushing department against Oklahoma State. Joe Jackson, 14 carries, 69 yards. He averaged 4.9 yards per carry. One of them was a 15-yarder, but that's about it. And if you take that 15-yard carry away, there was many times where he could have broken, done more, but he struggled on breaking tackles. He truly struggled on breaking tackles, and that was an issue. Avery had 9 carries for 26 yards. He did break a 30-yard rush, so a lot of those, sack-adjusted yards took him back. He was sacked a couple times in this game. There was a few times that some of the Oklahoma State cornerbacks outran Avery Johnson. They actually have some talent on this Oklahoma State defense, the guys that decided to stay. There were some impressive guys. I believe it was Parker Robinson, if I remember correctly, that was the one that chased him down from behind, and it was pretty impressive on the Oklahoma State side. There are some things to give credit to for Oklahoma State. The fact that they kept Kansas State involved in this game. You have to remember that so many people already left this program after Mike Gundy was fired. They decided to leave certain players this week from the program because they decided to take visits elsewhere. And a lot of these players that are starting this game and for the rest of the season were seen as backups just weeks ago, not at the beginning of the season, just weeks ago. And they found a way to stick around with this Kansas State squad. That should be even more embarrassing for Kansas State, but you should be able to give some credit where credit is due to the Cowboys in that case. Antonio Martin had 4 carries for 12 yards, but he really only had one good run. It was an 11-yard gain. And then Blake Barnett came in for 2 rushes, and he ended up only getting a yard total offense on that one. 30 rushes, 107 yards, averaging less than 4 yards per carry against Oklahoma State just can't happen. And when you look back and you see all the great running backs that this program has had over the last couple decades, you're talking about Sproles, Vaughn, you're naming those, DJ Giddens. It hurts to know that this running game is just nowhere there. And I think that is probably one of the biggest issues on this entire team this year. Nowhere did we think that was going to be a problem. I thought we headed into this season as a potential three-headed monster after, Dylan Edwards with Joe Jackson, and maybe even thought Antonio Martin Jr. would take a step up forward because what he did at the FCS level before heading over to Kansas State, rushing for over 1,000 yards. And that none of that has turned out to be the answer. The running game has really been a letdown this year, and I think that needs to be the biggest priority. Remember how last year we said the biggest priority was wide receiver and maybe some secondary? Well, they answered that. I think you have to get a solid answer at running back. Solid answer. And I'm talking about not just bringing in one player in the portal. Maybe one stud, but you need to build some depth in this running room because it's not it right now. It's not there. I don't think your starting running back for next season is on the roster right now. I don't think it is. I don't think it can be based on what we've seen so far this season. The wide receiver room, hopefully Jayce Brown can be healthy. Lincoln Cure got the start, and that was really cool. I thought that meant we were going to see more from Lincoln Cure, and he wound up still being more of a blocking type of receiver / tight end. He had 2 receptions for 4 yards. That's not enough, in my opinion. That's not enough. I spoke with Cody Stovall of Locked On Oklahoma State in our crossover. I spoke with you guys this week before, even more on this. I think you have to prove that Lincoln Cure belongs in this system so he doesn't leave in the portal. And if he's going to play, I don't know his behavior. I don't know Lincoln Cure on a personal level, but just speaking from a sports term and how college athletics and college athletes as a whole have been so far over the last couple seasons, if you are only getting this guy 2 receptions for 4 yards when you are supposed to try to involve him more in the system, you're getting him to start. That's not the answer. This should have been the game against Oklahoma State that Lincoln Cure went off and you got him 4 yards. And one of them was a 7-yard reception. The other one was for a loss. That's just got to get fixed. And that's the blames on the play calling. That's blames on the offensive line. You could point literally every finger. But if you are trying to improve this roster for next year, because obviously this year is going to be the worst year in a Chris Kleiman era since the COVID year, you have to look forward at who you want to have on this roster for years to come. And if Lincoln Cure is not the number one priority, then there's a problem, a very deep problem. And right now at 2 receptions, 4 yards, I'm screaming that problem is coming to life. So some big fixes that need to happen, I think, for the next 2 weeks when trying to get some of these younger players that you don't want to leave in the transfer portal involved. And look, you can make that argument saying, well, if they don't want to be here, good, get gone. Because I've seen that argument. And I think that's a little bit of an outdated argument in this world of college athletics. As much as you want the players to want to be at a program, that's not the only thing that's going to keep them here anymore. There are so many other intangibles from outside the field that are involved in these decision makings anymore. If Lincoln Cure thinks he can be an NFL type tight end type receiver at Kansas State because he has the opportunity to do so, they have proven that they can do that. Just look at the Washington Commanders roster for prime success, for prime indicator. If you want a tight end in the NFL, they got to prove it to him. They got to show it to him on the field as well. And with 2 receptions, 4 yards, I just don't think that's helping. On the other side, let's talk about what's to come. Because you got Utah and you got Colorado next. You have to win one if you want to play an extra game this season. And if you get that bowl win, maybe that does help with roster retention. Something that worked so well last year, going to happen again. We'll do that next to finish up this instant reaction of Kansas State taking down Oklahoma State 14-6. But first, when the opening whistle blows on a new repair, get your crew moving forward with Supply House. Order today and see parts on your doorstep tomorrow with over 280,000 plumbing, HVAC, and electrical items from your most trusted brands in the business. Their real-time inventory and honest lead times keep you from punting projects, while their industry-leading customer service always has your blind side covered. Wouldn't it be nice not to punt on something? Don't worry about Kansas State's first quarter in that one. Well, if you need parts fast for a project, Supply House has next day delivery. Talk about a game changer. Join the free Trade Master program today. Score serious perks like priority shipping, lower prices, and a dedicated support line. Visit supplyhouse.com to sign up for free and use promo code SHCollege5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. Real people, real service. Oh, man, it was an interesting one. There's no doubt about that in this game. Kansas State taking down Oklahoma State 14-6. They find a way to move to 500 on the season, 5-5, 4-3 in Big 12 play, and they keep their bowl hopes alive. Now, they could have lost this game and bowl hopes would have still technically been alive, but you got Utah next week on the road in Salt Lake City. And if you play anything like this, you're going to lose worse than you did against Texas Tech. Utah has been very good this year, especially in the second half of the season on the offensive side. They blew out Colorado. They took care of Colorado, and Colorado is the game you finished the season with. It is just one of those teams that is striving to find themselves in the college football playoffs. And I think that it's going to be a very tough game for you to win. So you getting this win against Oklahoma State and putting it would be nice to beat Utah, don't get me wrong. But putting them in a spot to be able to, dare I say, lose this game, you can still win against Colorado and get to bowl eligibility. Since losing to BYU, the only teams that Utah's lost to so far this season was Texas Tech. They lost 34-10. They lost BYU 24-21. That's the Holy War. That's a great rivalry. I mean, that's in comparison to the Sunflower Showdown, to Farmageddon when it comes to Big 12 rivalries. It's one of the best. And then after that game, they crushed Colorado 53-7. They crushed ranked Cincinnati 45-14. And then as of right now, we're recording this beforehand, but they played the night game in Waco against Baylor on ESPN2. Then they're going to host Kansas State, and then they finish the season off on the road in Lawrence. This team easily can go 10-2, and they can find themselves in the college football playoffs. The only thing stopping them is the Baylor Bears, the Kansas State Wildcats, and the Kansas Jayhawks. Kansas State has the opportunity to play spoiler, but if they do anything like they did in Stillwater, they're going to lose worse than I think than Colorado did. And I'm just saying, I'm just putting it out there. This Utah offense is really good. But on the plus side, you finish the season against Colorado. Colorado's 3-7 on the year. They're 1-6 in conference. They are the second worst team behind Oklahoma State in the conference. Now, going back to my original thought here, if you play just as bad as you did in Stillwater, Colorado will beat you. Colorado will find a way to win. And although they're not bowl eligible anymore, which is a good thing for the fact of not having a Deion Sanders trying to make it bowl eligibility, the fact that they have already out of bowl contention is not going to change the fact that they have a young quarterback in Julian Lewis trying to get right, trying to see if he can be the right guy for the future. And they're going to try and make a statement as well. So I wouldn't completely write off the fact that Kansas State could either go 7-5 or go 5-7. I think the most realistic spot is they do go 6-6. They do make a bowl game. It's not going to be the best bowl game in the world. I know a lot of people made jokes about going to the Rate Bowl last year. I don't even think you qualify for that one. You're definitely not going to fight for some Pop-Tarts. You're probably going to like a Liberty Bowl or something like that, but you make a bowl game. And I think that's huge for the argument of retention. I'm not saying it happens. I'm saying the argument for retention. Remember last year, they focused really hard at bringing people back. I don't know the exact argument, but you have to assume it was something about we were so close. We were so close last year, starting 7-1. If we just bring it back, add a couple more pieces, we'll get there. Well, they did that. They did retention. They brought the players back. They brought the Dylan Edwards. They brought the Jayce Browns. They brought the Avery Johnsons back. They supposedly added important pieces on the offensive line. They added in the secondary. And did it work? It didn't work. So it'll be really interesting to see if they can make that same argument again, or if they're just going to be ready to have to bite the bullet and watch some of these top players in their program decide to say, respect my decision. I will be entering the transfer portal with how many years of eligibility left. You know those social graphics. You know what they mean, what they say. And I think we're going to see that. I think regardless, we're going to see a lot of people hit the portal. Just trying to get you folks prepared. I think this win at Stillwater, although it was a win, because it was such a flat win, I think we have already started to see the slight amount of people starting to quit on this program. I think we're starting to see it. And I wouldn't be shocked if next week in Salt Lake City is an absolute blowout. After this game, it's hard to disagree. Utah has been wild on the offensive side. Kansas State scored 14 points on Oklahoma State. Unreal. We got more to talk about coming in the week. We're going to talk, obviously, more Chris Klieman's press conference. That'll come out on Sunday. We got some great games. Women's basketball on Sunday as well. We'll have a reaction show to that. Men's basketball on Monday. Thank goodness for the men's basketball team. I mean, going from men's basketball offense, how crazy that is, scoring 100 points a game, to what we saw with Kansas State's football offense. That's definitely something crazy to cover. Are you talking about both spectrums here? It's just egregious and absolutely unreal at the moment. Hopefully you can find a way to get that offense to speed back up. And unfortunately, that's probably going to be next season. But either way, we got a lot of stuff to cover on the channel. Make sure you hit subscribe. We always got you covered right here. Bringing you Wildcat coverage like no one else every single day right here on Locked On Kansas State. Now the #1 sports podcast network, Locked On Kansas State, your team every day. Please like the video. Please subscribe. We'll see you back here next time right here on Locked On Kansas State.